Well, Democratic presidential candidate Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. Would you like to welcome back to the show? Good to have you.
Just start on that note.
Yeah, we'll start on that. What was he talking about in terms of his relationship with the leader of North Korea?
Well, first, let me say that I think there is no one in the country more than the people in Hawaii who understand the seriousness of the threat coming from North Korea. It was just over a year ago that we had a missile alert that came across the phones of everyone in Hawaii saying a ballistic missile is headed your way, take shelter. And we had families, piling their kids into the car, driving to a cave to try to find shelter. A father who was lowering his daughter down a manhole cover to try to keep her safe, knowing that there were just minutes to live. So the seriousness of this threat from North Korea, the seriousness of the reality that we are at a greater risk of a nuclear catastrophe today than ever before is very real. President Trump, I think, should continue to pursue negotiations with North Korea to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. However, he's also got to recognize that things like pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal make it less likely that Kim Jong-un or North Korea will take him at his word when he says that our deal will matter and that we will keep our word.
The president says we don't have to worry about nuclear weapons in North Korea anymore. Do you and do the people of Hawaii believe that we don't have to worry about nuclear weapons from North Korea?
Not for a moment. Not for a moment. This threat still exists. And in fact, the increasing tensions make it the reality that this threat is not just coming from North Korea, but the increasing tensions with Russia and China. Other nuclear-armed countries in the world are also increasing this threat to a point where it is greater today than ever before.
Let's talk about Syria. David.
I wanted to ask Congresswoman Gabbard, you brought a very interesting guest last night to the State of the Union.
Yes.
A prominent Syrian politician who's part of the group we've been allying with in northeast Syria that's been keeping the peace there. And I'm wondering what you told this Syrian politician about what's ahead for them and as the American troops begin to pull out. Are they at risk of being slaughtered in those areas, and what should we do about it?
Well, I think more importantly, I heard from her their concerns about Turkey's threats, knowing that if there is a pullout of U.S. troops overnight and it's too hasty, then the Kurds, who have been our most effective fighting force against ISIS in Syria, will be left to Turkey's slaughter. She referred to what has already happened in places like Afrin in Syria, to know what would lie ahead if there is not an opportunity for the Kurds in the northern part of Syria to broker some form of security agreement that will allow them to, frankly, protect their homes and protect their families going forward. She also said, we never expected the United States to keep soldiers there forever. They always knew it would be a temporary situation focused on fighting against ISIS. All she's saying is give us the space to be able to make sure that we are able to secure ourselves before the United States pulls out all of our troops.
Did she ask you why you met with Assad?
No, she didn't. But we had a discussion about that, and she recognized why I met with him and agreed with that meeting, because she knows how important it is that we be willing to meet with adversaries or potential adversaries, not just our friends.
Do you think Assad is our enemy?
If we are serious about the pursuit of peace.
Do you think Assad is our enemy?
Assad is not the enemy of the United States because Syria does not pose a direct threat to the United States.
What do you say to Democratic voters who watched you go over there, and what do you say to military members who have been deployed repeatedly in Syria, pushing back against Assad?
People who have been deployed to Syria have been there focused on their mission, which has been to defeat ISIS. Our troops have not gone to Syria to wage yet another costly, destructive regime change war. And many troops I hear from express frustration at the fact that our country continues to wage senseless, costly regime change wars, followed by nation-building missions, leading to situations like we see in Afghanistan. so many examples of our troops being deployed, their lives put on the line, without understanding what the clear mission or objective is and how that mission actually serves the security of the American people in the United States.
Which I think a lot of Americans would agree with you there. But again, going back to Assad is not an enemy. Is he an adversary of the United States?
We have to look to who poses a threat to the United States and the American people.
I understand that, but there are a lot of people who don't pose a direct military threat to the United States who consider themselves to be adversaries of the United States. Vladimir Putin poses or considers America to be an enemy. We consider Russia to be an adversary. I'm just asking you, do you consider Assad to be an adversary of the United States?
When I look at whether it's Syria or Turkey or Russia or China or other countries in the world, I look at what are their interests, and are their interests counter to our interests.
So what would you say he is to the United States? If you cannot say that he's an adversary or an enemy, what is Assad to the U.S.? What is the word?
You can describe it however you want to describe it.
I want to know how you describe it.
My point is that whether it is Syria or any of these other countries, we need to look at how their interests are counter to or aligned with ours.
Are Assad's interests aligned with ours?
What are Assad's interests?
Assad seems interested in the slaughter primarily of his own people, in part. I mean, how does that line up? Survival, yes.
Exactly.
Well, he also
and he seems to be willing to go to great ends to do that.
He also uses weapons of mass destruction on
adversary
as well.
I mean, we can talk about all these things. My point here is...
Is it important to talk about these things? That he uses chemical weapons on his own people?
Of course, of course. It's important to talk about how our military is being used, what it is costing them, what it is costing the American people, and whether or not those missions, those objectives serve the security of the United States and the American people.
I want to ask you just a final question, Congresswoman. Your comments sound to me very much like a line in the president's speech last night where he said, "Great powers do not fight endless wars." And I'm wondering whether, in your mind, on the left of the Democratic Party, on the right of the Republican Party, there is this shared feeling, basically, enough. Time to get it over with. Is that something where there's some alignment between you and the president?
I think we have to be careful about making broad statements like that. Nobody likes war. Nobody wants to be at war. There are threats that exist to the American people, and we have a strong and capable and ready military that stands ready to keep our people safe. What needs to stop are these wars, whether it is the regime change wars or this new Cold War, this escalation and this nuclear arms race that has now been exacerbated by Trump pulling out of the INF Treaty. These are where the American people have frustrations with what is this all for and to what end, and how does this serve the American people's interests? The reality is the trillions of dollars that we spend on these wars are coming out of the pockets of American taxpayers who have very real needs that need to be addressed here at home.
So do you think, Congresswoman, there should be any United States troops stationed in Syria?
I don't believe there should be.
None at all.
But again, this goes back to how are we making these decisions? The many leaders in Congress and even leaders in the administration are saying we should keep troops in Syria to counter Iran. There has been no war declared by Congress against Iran. There's no authorization legally for the United States to maintain troops in Syria. So whether it is in Syria or in other parts of the world, we have to determine, are these missions worthy of our service members' sacrifice, and do those missions serve the interests of the American people?
You've expressed skepticism in the past that Assad, in fact, used chemical weapons on his own people. Do you believe he's used chemical weapons on his own people?
I certainly think it's possible. The evidence that my skepticism in the past has been solely on saying, show us the evidence before you deploy U.S. troops into military action. Because I served in Iraq, and I understood what that cost came when the American people were lied to and presented false evidence where we started off a new war.
Do you think chemical weapons were used at all in Syria?
Absolutely.
And so if it was not Assad, who would have used them?
There has been reports that chemical weapons have been used not only by the Syrian regime, but by other bad actors and terrorists within Syria.
You know, there are people who will watch this and have heard your previous comments and wonder what's going on here. Why you met with Assad?
I'm interested in the truth.
Why it looks like you were very cozy with Assad, and why you've sort of taken his side in this argument.
That is a line that comes from political opponents or people who are not interested in actually confronting the truth about U.S. foreign policy, what it should be, and the problems and the cost that has come to us because of this flawed and destructive policy.
Do you think that Assad is a good person?
No, I don't.
Okay.
So we're just trying to understand the context of the relationship.
The context.
You can't put a word on it, and most of us here at the table, I think it's safe to say, can.
The focus and the context is, how are our troops being used to serve the interests of the United States?
So let's move from Assad. As much as we would like this to be the Assad variety hour and talk about this for an hour or two, let's expand beyond that and talk about your presidential campaign and ask you the question we ask everybody who's running for president, all 427 Democrats who are running for president of the United States. Why are you running for president?
Because Washington and this president is filled with self-serving interests and corporate greed, and the American people are suffering. As a soldier, I took an oath to serve our country. And like all service members, those values and those principles of putting service before self are what is motivating me, are what is driving me to run for president and to bring those values of service before self, of respect and integrity and honor back to the White House.
As a former congressman, I always flinch when somebody would start a sentence by saying, your hometown paper. But I'm going to say this to you.
Oh, boy.
I always hated that line. When a sentence started that way, it never ended well. But your hometown paper said that you should focus on your job and talked about your campaign, presidential campaign, being in disarray. How would you respond to your hometown paper?
I'm grateful to the people of Hawaii who have elected me now, over 4 elections in Hawaii with nearly 80% of the vote. And so their trust and their confidence in me and what I'm doing to serve them is something that I very much appreciate.
Who do you consider to be the front runners in the Democratic Party right now? Who are you going to have to beat? Who are the candidates to beat if you're going to win the nomination?
There's a lot of people who are offering to serve. I'm focused on my own campaign and delivering my own message to the American people and my offering to serve them.
Any idea why David Duke came out and supported you?
No, I think what he stands for and his actions are despicable. I have rejected whatever claims he is making of so-called support, and I don't believe that anyone should give him a moment of attention.
Vladimir Putin, is he an adversary of the United States of America?
Yes.
Do you agree with the Intel chief's assessment that Vladimir Putin and Russia interfered with American democracy in 2016 and are going to try to do it again in 2020?
We have seen from those intel chiefs exactly how Russia used certain tactics, but I think it's also important for us to look at some of the underlying problems here, one of which is the lack of security within our own elections infrastructure.
Right.
We've seen other countries like North Korea and China and others try to meddle within our systems. I've introduced a bill called the Securing America's Elections Act that would require paper ballots or voter-verified paper backups if you're using an electronic system,
right,
to make it so that no one can come in and try to manipulate those votes that are being cast, and so people can have faith in our election systems.
But again, just to confirm, you agree with the Intel chiefs that Russia is trying to actively interfere in American democracy? All right. Casey, last question.
There have been reports that Russian apparatus that interfered in 2016 is potentially trying to help your campaign. Why do you think that is?
Cite those reports and their credibility.
Well, the Russian propaganda machine, we did an analysis actually.
I just want to point out.
News.
I want to point out that NBC article has been debunked and disproven.
By whom?
Because I would ask you to look at the credibility of the sources and the so-called experts.
Well, I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that my colleagues did not do their due diligence.
Other journalists,
I do know what our standards are here.
Other journalists have debunked and disproven the so-called experts that have been cited in that article. And I think it's actually very dangerous for articles like that and outlets like NBC to put out this information that seeks to bully people into saying, you can't come out and take the positions that I've taken of calling for an end to the Cold War, calling for an end to this nuclear crisis that we are facing. Otherwise, you're going to be smeared as someone who is a subject of Russian propaganda.
So you're essentially saying that you do not think that Russians are helping you at all, and that, in fact, any reporting to that effect is bullying Americans into not supporting
you. What I'm saying is the article that was put out has proven to be discredited. The experts have been proven to be discredited. The American people deserve the truth, and they deserve to know exactly what's happening, and to make sure that whether it's me or other candidates who are running for president are not immediately attempted to be discredited simply because of the message that we're delivering.
So since we're on the topic of Russia, and since it's 2019, I have to ask you, have you met with any Russians over the past several years? And are you currently trying to build a building in Moscow?
No and no.
Oh, no and no. Okay, very good. Well, we can end
Tulsi
there.
Tulsi Tower.
Wow.
Tulsi Tower, right in the middle of Moscow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good to have you on.
Thank you so much, and good luck out there.
Thank you.
Up next, the world.